I was sitting at my kitchen table on a Tuesday morning in March when I noticed something odd about the property survey I had just received from the county assessor's office in Gilbert, Arizona. The document had arrived because I was refinancing my mortgage, and the bank required an updated survey of my property lines. What I saw made my coffee go cold in my hand. The community pool, the crown jewel of the Saguaro Ridge Homeowners Association, sat squarely on top of my utility easement. Not partially, not just clipping the edge. The entire pool structure, the deck, the equipment shed, all of it was built directly over a 20-foot wide easement that ran along the back of my property and extended onto what the HOA claimed was common area. I am Yannick Lawson, a mechanical engineer who had moved to this subdivision 3 years ago after accepting a job with an aerospace company in Phoenix. I bought my house specifically because it backed up to the community amenities, thinking it would be convenient. The pool was maybe 50 feet from my back fence, and I could hear the splashing and laughter on hot summer days. It never occurred to me that there might be a problem with where it was built. The easement was clearly marked on the survey in bold red lines. It was a utility and access easement, which meant that the city and utility companies had the legal right to dig up that entire strip of land if they needed to access water lines, sewer pipes, or electrical conduits. More importantly, it meant that nothing permanent could be built on it without violating the easement terms. I pulled out my laptop and started digging through the county records online. Gilbert has a pretty good digital system, and within an hour, I had found the building permits for the pool. Or rather, I found what should have been the building permits. The documents were incomplete, missing several required signatures from the city engineering department. There was no notation that the utility easement had been vacated or modified. The pool had been built in 2019, about 4 years before I moved in, and from what I could tell, someone had either missed the easement entirely or had deliberately ignored it. My phone rang. It was my buddy Marcus from work, calling to see if I wanted to grab lunch. I told him I would call him back because I had just discovered something that might turn into a nightmare. He laughed and told me to let him know if I needed help burying bodies. I did not find it funny at the time. I spent the rest of the morning making copies of everything I had found. The survey showing the easement, the incomplete permits, the property deed that clearly outlined the easement restrictions. I even found the original subdivision plat from 2015 when the neighborhood was first developed, and the easement was marked there too. This was not some ancient, forgotten restriction. This was a current, active easement that someone had built a massive concrete pool on top of. The next morning, I decided to call the city planning department. I spoke with a woman named Jennifer who worked in code enforcement. I explained what I had found, and there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Can you send me the survey and the permit numbers?" she asked, her voice suddenly very professional. I emailed everything to her while we were still on the phone. I could hear her typing and clicking through screens. "Mr. Lawson," she said after a few minutes, "I am going to need to escalate this to my supervisor. The permits you are referencing show final approval, but I am not seeing the engineering sign-off that would be required for construction over or near a utility easement. Can you give me until Friday to look into this?" It was Wednesday. I told her that was fine and gave her my cell number. She promised to call me back by end of business Friday, and I believed her. She sounded like someone who had just realized there was a major problem. I did not hear from Jennifer on Friday. I did hear from Brenda Patterson, the president of the Saguaro Ridge HOA. She called me at 6:30 in the evening, right as I was making dinner. "Mr. Lawson, this is Brenda Patterson from the HOA board. I understand you have been making inquiries with the city about our community pool, she said. Her voice had that tight, controlled quality that people use when they are very angry, but trying to sound reasonable. That's correct, I said, putting my phone on speaker so I could keep chopping vegetables. I discovered that the pool is built on my utility easement, and the permits do not appear to be properly approved. I can assure you that everything was done correctly when the pool was built, Brenda said. We hired licensed contractors and the city inspected everything. I do not appreciate you going behind the board's back and causing trouble with the city. I did not go behind anyone's back, I replied, feeling my own anger starting to rise. I ordered a survey of my property and discovered a problem. I reported it to the appropriate authorities. That's what anyone would do. The pool has been there for 7 years, Brenda continued, as if I had not spoken. There has never been a problem. I think you are making a mountain out of a molehill, and I would appreciate it if you would drop this matter. The pool is sitting on my easement, Brenda. That's not a molehill. That's a major encroachment, and if the permits are not valid, that's the HOA's problem, not mine. There was a long silence. When Brenda spoke again, her voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. We will be discussing this at the next board meeting, she said. I suggest you attend. It is next Thursday at 7 in the clubhouse. She hung up before I could respond. I did not sleep well that night. I kept thinking about the implications of what I had found. If the city determined that the pool was illegally built, they could order it to be removed. That would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more. The HOA would probably try to pass that cost on to all the homeowners through a special assessment. People were going to be furious, and I was going to be the guy who had discovered the problem. I could already imagine my neighbors crossing the street to avoid talking to me. Monday morning, Jennifer from the city called me back. She sounded stressed. Mr. Lawson, I have reviewed the files with my supervisor and with the city engineer. We have some serious concerns about the pool construction. The permits were never properly finalized. The engineering review was marked as pending, not approved, and somehow the project moved forward anyway. We are opening an investigation into how this happened. What does that mean for the pool? I asked. Right now, nothing immediate, Jennifer said. We need to complete our investigation first. But I want to be honest with you. This could result in the pool being declared a non-conforming structure. In the worst case, it could be ordered removed or relocated. How long will the investigation take? Probably a few weeks. We will need to interview the original contractors, review all the documentation, and assess whether the current structure poses any safety or utility access issues. I will keep you informed. After I hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot at work and tried to process everything. I had only been trying to refinance my mortgage. I had not set out to create a massive problem for my HOA or my neighbors. But now that I knew about the issue, I could not just ignore it. The easement existed for a reason. If the city ever needed to access the utilities under that area, they would have to tear up the pool to do it. And if that happened without warning, the HOA would be left with an even bigger mess. I decided to do some more research on my own. I went to the Gilbert Town Hall that afternoon and requested copies of all the correspondence related to the pool construction. Arizona has strong public records laws, and they had to give me everything unless it was specifically exempted. What I found was troubling. There were several emails from the city engineer back in 2019 raising concerns about the utility easement. The engineer had specifically noted that the proposed pool location conflicted with the easement and had requested a revised site plan. There were no revised plans in the file. Instead, There was a handwritten note saying, per verbal approval from HOA attorney, proceed with construction. There was no signature, no date, and no documentation of who had authorized moving forward. Someone had screwed up badly. Either the city had dropped the ball and failed to stop construction that should never have been approved, or the HOA had deliberately proceeded despite knowing there was a problem. Neither scenario was good. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday, and I spent the days leading up to it preparing. I made copies of all the documents I had found, the survey showing the easement, the incomplete permits, the emails from the city engineer, the original subdivision plat. I put everything in a neat folder and practiced what I was going to say. Thursday evening arrived too quickly. I walked over to the clubhouse at 6:45. The building was a nice facility with a meeting room, a small gym, and a kitchenette. About 30 people were already there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows facing a long table where the board members would sit. I recognized most of them as neighbors, though I did not know many of their names. We were the kind of subdivision where people waved to each other, but did not really socialize much. Brenda Patterson was already at the board table, arranging papers and talking in a low voice with 2 other women and 1 man. Brenda was probably in her mid-50s, with short blonde hair and the kind of put-together appearance that suggested she spent a lot of time and money on maintaining her image. She was wearing a blazer and had reading glasses on a chain around her neck. The other board members looked uncomfortable, and I wondered if Brenda had already told them about my discovery. I found a seat near the front and waited. More people trickled in, and by 7 the room was fairly full. Brenda called the meeting to order and launched into the usual HOA business. Approval of the previous meeting's minutes. A report on the association's finances. A discussion about whether to repaint the playground equipment. It was all painfully boring, and I could tell that people were starting to get restless. Finally, 45 minutes into the meeting, Brenda looked at her agenda and said, "We have one item under new business. Mr. Lawson has raised some concerns about the community pool, and I have asked him to present those concerns to the board so we can address them." Every head in the room turned to look at me. I stood up, feeling my pulse quicken, and walked to the front of the room. I handed copies of my documentation to each board member and then turned to face the group. "Thank you for letting me speak," I began. 3 weeks ago, I ordered a property survey as part of refinancing my mortgage. That survey revealed that the community pool is built entirely on top of a utility easement that runs along the back of my property. I contacted the city to inquire about the building permits, and I discovered that the permits were never properly finalized. The city engineer raised concerns about the easement in 2019, but construction proceeded anyway without those concerns being resolved. The room erupted in noise. People were talking over each other, asking questions, expressing disbelief. Brenda banged a gavel on the table, which I had not realized HOA boards actually used. "Please, let Mr. Lawson finish," she said, though her expression suggested she would rather do anything but let me continue. "The city is now conducting an investigation," I continued. "Depending on what they find, the pool could be declared a non-conforming structure. In a worst-case scenario, it could be ordered removed or relocated. I wanted to bring this to the board's attention so that we can figure out how to address it." "This is ridiculous," said a man in the back. "The pool has been there for 7 years. You cannot just tear down a pool because of some technicality." "It is not a technicality," I replied. "A utility easement exists so that the city can access critical infrastructure. If they need to dig up that area for repairs, they have every right to do so, and they will not care that there is a pool in the way." "Why are you doing this?" asked a woman near the front. She looked genuinely distressed. "Are you trying to ruin the neighborhood?" "I am not trying to ruin anything," I said, feeling defensive. "I discovered a problem and I reported it. That is what anyone should do." Brenda stood up and the room quieted down. "Mr. Lawson, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, but I think you are overreacting. The pool was built by licensed professionals. The city inspected it. Just because there is some paperwork issue does not mean there is actually a problem with the pool itself." "The problem is not the pool's construction quality," I said. "The problem is that it is built in a location where it legally should not exist. The easement was there before the pool was built. Someone should have caught this, but they did not." "Well, easements can be moved or vacated," Brenda said dismissively. "I am sure we can work with the city to resolve this administratively. There is no need to panic everyone." "Have you looked into vacating the easement?" I asked. Brenda hesitated. "Not yet, but I will contact our HOA attorney first thing tomorrow." I returned to my seat, and the meeting devolved into chaos. People were arguing with each other, some blaming me for causing trouble, others angry at the board for allowing the pool to be built incorrectly. After 20 minutes of this, Brenda adjourned the meeting and everyone filed out, casting dark looks in my direction. I walked home alone, feeling like I had just painted a target on my back. The next morning, I received a letter from the HOA attorney. It was waiting in my mailbox, which meant someone had hand-delivered it. The letter informed me that I was potentially liable for any costs associated with remedying the easement issue, because I was the property owner on whose land the easement existed. The letter suggested that I should have disclosed the easement issue before purchasing the property, and that my failure to do so constituted negligence. I read the letter 3 times, feeling my anger build with each pass. The argument was absurd. The easement was clearly marked on the deed and the original survey. It was not my responsibility to tell the HOA not to build on it. They should have done their due diligence before construction. This letter was nothing more than an attempt to intimidate me into backing off. I called my own attorney, a guy named Richard Chen who had handled my house closing 3 years ago. I explained the situation and read him the letter from the HOA attorney. Richard was quiet for a moment, then said, "They are blowing smoke. You have no liability here. The easement predates the pool, and you did not give them permission to build on it. If anything, the HOA could be liable to you for encroaching on your easement rights." "So what should I do?" I asked. "Nothing right now," Richard said. "Let the city finish its investigation. If the HOA tries to take any action against you, call me immediately. In the meantime, document everything. Every conversation, every letter, every interaction with the board." I thanked him and hung up, feeling slightly better but still deeply uneasy. I had lived in this neighborhood for 3 years without any problems, and now I was embroiled in a legal dispute with my own HOA. It felt surreal. 2 weeks later, Jennifer from the city called me with an update. The investigation had been completed, and the findings were not good for the HOA. The city engineer had concluded that the pool should never have been built in its current location. The permits had been improperly processed by a city employee who no longer worked there, and that employee had apparently signed off on the project without waiting for engineering approval. The city was now formally notifying the HOA that the pool was a non-conforming structure and that they had 90 days to submit a remediation plan. "What kind of remediation are we talking about?" I asked. "They have a few options," Jennifer said. "They could apply to have the easement vacated, but that would require approval from all the utility companies and from the city council. It is a long process, and there is no guarantee it would be approved. They could relocate the pool, which would be very expensive. Or they could remove the pool entirely. Those are really the only options that bring the property into compliance. What happens if they do not do anything? Then the city can take enforcement action, which could include fines and ultimately a court order to remove the structure. But we would prefer not to go that route. We are hoping the HOA will work with us to find a solution. After that call, things moved quickly. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting for the following week. This time, the meeting was even more crowded than before, with at least 60 homeowners packed into the clubhouse. Brenda looked tired and stressed, and the other board members looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Brenda explained the situation to the assembled homeowners, though her version was heavily sanitized. She made it sound like the city was being unreasonable and nitpicky, and she barely mentioned the fact that the permits had been improperly approved. She also did not mention that the pool was sitting on my easement specifically, making it sound like a general zoning issue. "We have consulted with our attorney and we have several options," Brenda said. "First, we can try to have the easement vacated. This would allow the pool to remain where it is. Second, we can relocate the pool to a different location within the common area. Third, we can remove the pool entirely. Each option has different costs and challenges." "How much are we talking about?" someone asked. Brenda looked at her notes. "To pursue vacating the easement, we are looking at legal fees of probably $20,000 to $30,000, with no guarantee of success. To relocate the pool would cost between $250,000 and $400,000, depending on the new location and site preparation. To remove the pool and not replace it would cost about $75,000. The room erupted in angry voices. People were shouting questions and accusations. Several people demanded to know how this had happened in the first place. Others wanted to know who was going to pay for it. "We will need to do a special assessment," Brenda said, raising her voice over the din. "The HOA reserves do not have enough to cover this kind of expense. Based on our preliminary estimate, we are looking at a special assessment of between $1,500 and $8,000 per household, depending on which option we pursue." That did not go over well. People started yelling at the board, at each other, and at me. Several people turned around and glared at me as if I had personally built the pool in the wrong place. "This is Lawson's fault," someone shouted. "He is the one who started this whole mess. He should pay for it." "I did not build the pool on my easement," I called back. "The HOA did that. I just discovered it." "You could have kept your mouth shut," a woman yelled. "Nobody was getting hurt. You just wanted to cause trouble." I stood up, feeling my temper flare. If I had kept my mouth shut, and the city discovered this on their own, the HOA would be facing even bigger fines and penalties. I did you all a favor by bringing this to light so it could be addressed proactively. "Some favor," someone muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Brenda banged her gavel again. "This is not productive. Mr. Lawson is not responsible for this situation. The board will be reviewing our options and will schedule another meeting once we have more concrete information on costs and timelines. In the meantime, I would ask everyone to please remain calm and civil." The meeting broke up shortly after that, and I left as quickly as I could. As I was walking across the parking lot, a man caught up with me. He was probably in his 60s, tall and fit, with gray hair and kind eyes. "Mr. Lawson, I am Ted Harrison. I live over on Mesquite Drive," he said, extending his hand. "I just wanted to say that I think you did the right thing. This is not your fault, no matter what some people are saying." I shook his hand, grateful for the support. "Thank you. I appreciate that." "I have been on HOA boards before in other neighborhoods," Ted said. This kind of thing happens more often than you would think. Someone cuts corners or does not do proper due diligence, and then years later it comes back to bite everyone. The board should be thanking you for catching this before it became an even bigger problem. We talked for a few more minutes, and Ted gave me his phone number in case I needed anything. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. At least someone in the neighborhood did not hate me. Over the next month, the HOA board worked with their attorney to explore options. I stayed in touch with Jennifer at the city and made sure I had copies of all their correspondence. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that the original pool construction had been rushed and poorly planned. The HOA applied to have the easement vacated, which required submitting applications to the city water department, the electric utility, and the gas company. Each agency had to review the request and determine whether they needed to maintain access to that particular stretch of land. The process was slow and bureaucratic, and the agencies were not particularly motivated to help the HOA out of a jam of their own making. Meanwhile, the HOA board sent out a survey to all homeowners asking which option they preferred. The choices were to pursue easement vacation, relocate the pool, or remove the pool entirely. The survey results were not surprising. Most people wanted to pursue the easement vacation first because it was the cheapest option, even though it had the lowest chance of success. Nobody wanted to pay a huge special assessment. In June, 3 months after I had first discovered the problem, the utility companies and the city all came back with their responses. The water department and the electric company both denied the request to vacate the easement. They explained that the easement provided critical access to infrastructure that served not just our neighborhood but several surrounding areas. There was a major water main and a high-voltage electrical conduit running directly under where the pool now sat. Vacating the easement was not an option. The gas company approved the vacation request, but that did not matter. All 3 agencies had to agree, and 2 of them had said no. Brenda scheduled another emergency meeting to discuss next steps. By this point, it was late June, and the pool was open for the summer. Kids were swimming in it every day, completely oblivious to the fact that their favorite hangout spot might soon cease to exist. I attended the meeting, though I seriously considered staying home. The hostility toward me had not diminished. I had been receiving nasty notes in my mailbox, and someone had egged my car. A few neighbors had stopped speaking to me entirely, but I felt like I needed to be there to defend myself and to make sure the board did not try to pin this on me somehow. Brenda opened the meeting by explaining that the easement vacation had been denied. She looked defeated, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "This leaves us with 2 options," she said. "We can relocate the pool or we can remove it. We have obtained bids for both." Relocation would cost approximately $360,000 and would take about 6 months to complete. Removal would cost $80,000 and would be completed in about a month. "What about building a new pool in a different location after removing this one?" someone asked. "That would be even more expensive than relocation," Brenda said. "We would be looking at close to $500,000 because we would have to build an entirely new pool from scratch, rather than moving the existing structure. So basically, we are looking at a special assessment of either $2,000 per household for removal, or nearly $8,000 per household for relocation," said one of the other board members, a woman named Carol. The room was silent. People looked shell-shocked. $8,000 was a lot of money for most families, especially coming as an unexpected bill. "Is there any way to finance this?" someone asked. "Can we take out a loan and spread the cost over several years?" "We are looking into that," Brenda said. but any loan would have to be paid back through increased HOA dues, which would also require a vote. "I vote we remove the pool and be done with it," said a man in the back. $2,000 is a lot better than $8,000, and frankly, I am tired of dealing with this. "The pool is the main amenity in this neighborhood," someone else argued. "It is one of the reasons people bought houses here. We cannot just get rid of it." "We should sue whoever built it wrong," another person suggested. "Make them pay to fix their mistake." Brenda shook her head. "We looked into that. The contractor who built the pool is no longer in business. They dissolved their LLC 3 years ago. There is nobody to sue." "What about the city?" someone asked. "They approved the permits. They should be liable." "Our attorney says we could try to sue the city, but it would be very expensive, and the chances of success are low. The city has governmental immunity for most actions, and we would have to prove gross negligence. It would take years and could easily cost more than just fixing the problem." The discussion went in circles for over an hour. People were angry, frustrated, and scared. Many homeowners were already stretched thin financially, and the idea of a special assessment was devastating. But there was no magic solution. The pool was illegally built, and it had to be addressed one way or another. Finally, Brenda called for a vote. The options were to relocate the pool or remove it. The vote was not close. By a margin of more than 2-1, the homeowners voted to remove the pool entirely. It was the cheaper option, and most people just wanted the nightmare to be over. As the meeting was wrapping up, a woman named Susan Kane stood up. Susan was one of Brenda's closest allies on the board and had been vocally critical of me throughout this entire ordeal. "I just want to say that this is absolutely unacceptable," Susan said, her voice shaking with anger. "Our neighborhood is losing its pool because one person decided to make a big deal out of a technicality. Yannick Lawson should be ashamed of himself." I had been quiet for most of the meeting, but that was too much. I stood up and faced Susan. "The pool is being removed because it was built illegally," I said, keeping my voice level. "I did not build it there. I did not approve the permits. I did not cut corners or ignore the easement. The board and the contractor did that. All I did was discover the problem and report it. If you want to be angry at someone, be angry at the people who made the mistake in the first place, not the person who found it." "You could have handled this privately," Susan shot back. "You did not have to involve the city." "Yes, I did," I replied. "Because if I had not, and the city had found out later through an inspection or a complaint, the penalties would have been much worse. The HOA could have been facing tens of thousands of dollars in fines on top of the remediation costs. I actually saved you money by bringing this forward when I did." Susan started to respond, but Brenda cut her off. "That is enough. This meeting is adjourned." I walked out of the clubhouse and did not look back. The pool closed at the end of July. The HOA sent out a notice saying that it was closed for repairs, but everyone knew what was really happening. In early August, a demolition crew showed up and began tearing out the concrete. It took them about a week to remove the pool structure, the decking, and the equipment shed. They filled in the hole with dirt and graded it level, then covered it with sod. By the end of August, you would never know there had been a pool there, except for a few patches where the grass had not fully grown in yet. The special assessment notices went out in September. Each household owed $1,950, due by the end of October. The actual cost had come in slightly under the estimate, which was the only good news in the entire situation. I paid my assessment without complaint, even though I felt like I should not have to. But there was no point in fighting it. The HOA had the authority to levy special assessments, and everyone had to pay regardless of fault. The fallout from the pool situation continued for months. 3 of the 5 board members, including Brenda Patterson, resigned in October. They were replaced by new members who ran on a platform of increased transparency and better oversight. One of the new board members was Ted Harrison, the man who had approached me in the parking lot after that contentious meeting. I was glad to see him get involved. In November, I received a call from Jennifer at the city. She told me that the city had completed its internal review of how the pool permits had been improperly approved. The employee who had signed off on construction without engineering approval had been a clerk in the planning department who had apparently been overwhelmed and had cut corners to clear his backlog of work. He had left the city about a year after the pool was built to take a job in the private sector. The city had updated its procedures to prevent similar issues in the future. "I wanted to thank you for bringing this to our attention," Jennifer said. "I know it created a lot of problems for your HOA, but if that pool had stayed there and we had needed to access the utilities under it, it would have been a disaster. You did the right thing." I appreciated her saying that, even though it did not make me feel much better about being the neighborhood pariah. By December, things had started to calm down. People were still not happy about losing the pool and having to pay the special assessment, but the anger had dulled into resignation. A few neighbors even apologized to me for the way they had treated me during the height of the crisis. One woman brought me a plate of Christmas cookies and admitted that she had been one of the people sending me nasty notes. She said she had been scared and angry and had taken it out on me, and she was sorry. I accepted her apology and ate the cookies, which were actually pretty good. The new HOA board held a town hall meeting in January to discuss plans for the future. Ted Harrison ran the meeting, and it was a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous year. The board presented a proposal to build a new pool in a different location, one that did not conflict with any easements or setbacks. They had obtained preliminary cost estimates and were working on a financing plan that would spread the cost over 10 years through increased dues rather than another massive special assessment. The proposal was put to a vote in February, and it passed overwhelmingly. People wanted a pool, and they were willing to pay for it as long as it was done right this time. In March, I received another call from Richard Chen, my attorney. He told me that the HOA's insurance company had reached out to him. Apparently, the HOA had finally filed a claim related to the pool situation, and the insurance company was conducting its own investigation. As part of that investigation, they wanted to interview me. I agreed to the interview, which took place in Richard's office. The insurance investigator was a woman named Patricia who asked me detailed questions about how I had discovered the easement issue, what I had done in response, and what communications I had with the HOA board. I answered everything truthfully and provided copies of all my documentation. A month later, Richard called me with interesting news. The insurance company had determined that the HOA's previous board had been negligent in their oversight of the pool construction. The policy included coverage for errors and omissions by board members, and the insurance company was going to pay a substantial settlement to the HOA. The exact amount was confidential, but Richard told me it was enough to cover most of the cost of building a new pool. They are also going after the city for their share of the responsibility, Richard said. The city's insurance is probably going to settle as well, rather than go through a long court battle. Your HOA is actually going to come out of this in decent shape financially. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The neighborhood was going to get a new pool after all, and nobody was going to have to pay another special assessment. Maybe people would finally stop being mad at me. The new pool broke ground in May, almost exactly 2 years after I had first discovered the easement problem. It was being built on the far side of the common area, well away from any easements or property lines. The design was nicer than the old pool, with a larger deck area and better landscaping. Construction was expected to take about 4 months, with an opening date targeted for late summer. I attended the groundbreaking ceremony, which the new board had organized as a way to rebuild community spirit. There were probably 100 people there, including families with kids who were excited to finally be getting a pool again. Ted Harrison gave a short speech about the importance of doing things right and learning from past mistakes. He did not mention me by name, but he did thank the homeowner who brought the original issue to light and helped us avoid an even bigger problem down the road. A few people actually clapped, which was more than I had expected. After the ceremony, Brenda Patterson approached me. I had not spoken to her since she had resigned from the board, and I was surprised to see her there. She looked older and more tired than I remembered. "Mr. Lawson, can I talk to you for a moment?" she asked. We walked away from the crowd to a quiet spot near the playground. "I owe you an apology," Brenda said. "When you first brought up the pool issue, I was defensive and I treated you badly. I was embarrassed that this had happened on my watch and I took it out on you. That was wrong. You were just trying to do the right thing and I made you into a villain." "I am sorry." I did not know what to say. I had spent so many months being angry at Brenda and the old board that I had not expected this. "I appreciate you saying that," I finally replied. "I know this was hard on everyone, including you. I never wanted to cause problems. I just could not ignore what I had found." "I know," Brenda said. "And you were right. If you had not caught it, someone else would have eventually, and it would have been even worse. We should have done better due diligence when we built the original pool. That was our failure, not yours." We talked for a few more minutes and then Brenda excused herself. I watched her walk back to her car and I felt like a chapter had finally closed. The new pool opened in late August, right before Labor Day. The grand opening celebration was huge, with food trucks, a DJ, and free swimming for all residents. I went with a friend from work who had been supportive through the whole ordeal. The pool was beautiful, and it was clear that no expense had been spared in making it a first-class facility. As I was standing by the pool watching kids jump off the diving board, Ted Harrison came over. "Quite a difference from 2 years ago," he said. "No kidding," I replied. "I never thought we would get here." "You know, a lot of people have come up to me over the past few months and told me they were wrong about you," Ted said. "They realize now that you did not cause this problem, you just found it. And finding it when we did, rather than years down the road, probably saved us all a lot of money and headaches." "I wish people had realized that at the time," I said. "People do not think rationally when they are scared and angry," Ted said, "but they come around eventually." "You are a hero, even if it took people a while to see it." I would not have gone that far, but I appreciated the sentiment. The pool became the heart of the neighborhood again. On summer evenings, it was packed with families, and on weekends there were always kids playing Marco Polo or diving for rings. It was everything a community pool should be, and it was built in a place where it was not going to cause any legal problems. I refinanced my mortgage successfully, which had been the whole point of getting that survey in the first place. The new property survey showed the pool in its correct location, well away from my easement. Everything was finally as it should be. In October, I ran into Susan Kane at the grocery store. Susan was the woman who had accused me of causing trouble and said I should be ashamed of myself at that horrible meeting 2 years ago. I braced myself for another confrontation, but she surprised me. "Yannick, "I have been wanting to talk to you," she said, stopping her cart next to mine. "I owe you an apology. I said some terrible things about you during the pool situation, and I was completely wrong. You were trying to help, and I made you into the bad guy. I am really sorry." It seemed like everyone was apologizing to me lately. I told Susan that I appreciated her saying that, and we chatted for a few minutes about neighborhood gossip before going our separate ways. It was not a deep conversation, but it felt like a resolution of sorts. Life in Saguaro Ridge slowly returned to normal. The new board was doing a good job managing the HOA, and there had not been any major controversies since the pool situation was resolved. People were friendly to me again, and I no longer felt like I had to avoid community events. In December, almost 3 years after I had first discovered the easement problem, I received a letter from the Arizona Real Estate Department. They were conducting a review of HOA governance practices and had heard about the pool situation. They wanted to use it as a case study in a training program they were developing for HOA board members on the importance of proper due diligence and permit compliance. I called the number on the letter and spoke with a woman named Margaret who was running the program. She explained that they wanted to create educational materials to help other HOAs avoid making similar mistakes. She asked if I would be willing to be interviewed for the program, and I agreed. The interview took place in February at a state office building in Phoenix. Margaret and 2 of her colleagues asked me to walk through the entire timeline of events, from discovering the easement issue to the resolution with the new pool. They were particularly interested in how the city and HOA had worked together to find a solution, and how communication had broken down initially. One of the biggest problems we see with HOAs is that board members often do not have professional expertise in areas like construction, permitting, and land use, Margaret explained. They are volunteers doing their best, but they do not always know what questions to ask or what red flags to look for. We want to create resources that help them make better decisions. I told her I thought that was a great idea, and that I hoped it would prevent other neighborhoods from going through what we had experienced. The training program launched a few months later, and I received a copy of the materials. They had created a whole module on the importance of easements and setbacks, using the Saguaro Ridge Pool as an example of what happens when these issues are ignored. My name was not used in the materials, which I appreciated. The focus was on the lessons learned, not on individual blame. By the summer, 3.5 years after this whole thing had started, life was completely back to normal. I was on good terms with my neighbors, the HOA was running smoothly, and the pool was a thriving community amenity. I had even started dating a woman I met at a neighborhood barbecue, and things were going well. One evening in July, I was sitting on my back patio having a beer when Ted Harrison stopped by. He had been out for a walk and saw me outside. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, come on up," I said, gesturing to a chair. Ted sat down and we chatted for a while about nothing in particular. Then he got to the point of his visit. "I wanted to let you know that the board is planning to do a formal recognition at the annual meeting in August," he said. "We are going to acknowledge what you did in bringing the easement issue to light, and thank you for your diligence. I know it was a rough time, but the fact is, you probably saved this neighborhood from a much bigger disaster." I felt embarrassed. That is really not necessary. I was just doing what anyone would do. "No, you were doing what anyone should do, but most people would not have," Ted said. "Most people would have seen a potential problem and would have looked the other way because dealing with it was uncomfortable. You did the hard thing, even though you knew it would make you unpopular. That takes courage, and it deserves recognition." I did not know what to say, so I just thanked him. The annual meeting took place in mid-August at the clubhouse. It was a much more casual affair than the emergency meetings during the pool crisis. People were relaxed and friendly, and there was even a dessert table with cookies and brownies. When it came time for new business, Ted stood up and called me to the front of the room. I felt my face get hot as I walked up, feeling like I was about to receive an award at a school assembly. 3.5 years ago, Yannick Lawson discovered that our community pool had been built on a utility easement without proper permits, Ted said to the assembled homeowners. He could have ignored this information, or he could have handled it quietly to avoid controversy. Instead, he did the right thing and brought it to the attention of the board and the city. That decision was not popular at the time, and Yannick faced a lot of criticism and hostility from people in this community. There were a few uncomfortable coughs from the audience, but the fact is, Yannick's actions ultimately saved us from a much worse situation, Ted continued. If the city had discovered the problem on their own during a routine inspection or an emergency utility repair, we would have faced massive fines and penalties on top of the remediation costs. Because Yannick brought it forward proactively, we were able to work with the city to find the best solution, and we were able to recover most of our costs through insurance settlements. We now have a beautiful new pool that is properly permitted and built in the right location. None of that would have happened without Yannick's diligence. Ted turned to me and handed me a framed certificate. It was a simple thing, just a piece of paper with some official-looking calligraphy, but it meant more to me than I expected. On behalf of the Saguaro Ridge Homeowners Association, I want to thank you for your integrity and your commitment to doing the right thing, even when it was difficult, Ted said. You are exactly the kind of neighbor we should all aspire to be. The room erupted in applause. It was not grudging or polite applause. It was genuine, enthusiastic clapping, and several people stood up. I felt tears prick my eyes, which was embarrassing, but I could not help it. After years of being treated like a villain, it felt incredible to be recognized as someone who had actually helped. I mumbled something about just trying to do the right thing, and Ted mercifully let me return to my seat. The meeting continued with other business, but I barely heard any of it. I just sat there holding my certificate and feeling like I had finally been vindicated. After the meeting, dozens of people came up to me to shake my hand or give me a hug. People I barely knew thanked me for what I had done. Parents told me that their kids loved the new pool and that they appreciated me fighting for what was right. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. As I was walking home that night, certificate tucked under my arm, I reflected on everything that had happened. It had been a long, difficult journey from that morning when I first saw the survey and realized the pool was on my easement. There had been moments when I regretted ever ordering that survey, moments when I wished I had just looked the other way and pretended I had never seen the problem. But I had not looked the other way. I had done the hard thing, the right thing, and in the end it had worked out. The neighborhood had a better pool than before. The HOA had learned valuable lessons about due diligence and oversight, and I had proven to myself that I had the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it cost me. The certificate is now hanging in my home office, and every time I look at it, I am reminded that doing the right thing is not always easy or popular, but it is always worth it in the end.